Hello, everybody. Hi, Camilla. Hi, Chris. Thank you for having me. Title of my presentation is Lipstick Sisterhood, Women's Rituals, Bonding and Cooperation, a case study from Slovakia. In this presentation, I will link Camilla's cosmetic coalitions model to the ethnographic data that I gathered among the Slovak women who bought and shared the same direct sales cosmetics. I will first look at women's cosmetic rituals, and as I will be analyzing them, I'll be looking at bonding, cooperation, testing for commitment to the group, egalitarianism, sharing, and morality. First, I will talk a little bit about research environment, so we have an idea what I studied, and then I'll start with the analysis. So I did my research in the urban environment of Slovak capital, Bratislava. I worked with 2 direct sales cosmetics companies. Altogether, I worked with 15 small collectives of women. There were about 3 to 4 women or 6-ish, sometimes more. Some of these collectives operated with representatives who sold cosmetics to them, and some of them operated without representatives. I worked with 60 representatives and 26 cosmetic purchasers. I had a map here to see where the Slovakia is. The red slice here, and capital Bratislava, fairly urbanized environment. The optimal selling strategy that was represented, set, and encouraged by the cosmetic companies was supposed to be one-to-one encounter between client and representative. Representatives were supposed to achieve the highest profit possible, and the client was supposed to get the best bargain possible. The strategy was competitive. The representatives competed for the number of clients, for the height of their profits, for the volume of sold cosmetics. It was individualistic because the companies saw this procedure as buying the best cosmetics for beautification for an individual woman. And it was very instrumental, a very business-like exchange. You've got a catalog, choose a product, make an order, I deliver the product, you pay me, that's it. However, what I observed amongst the women I studied was very different from this rational, instrumental procedure. Women usually organize, the women I studied organize themselves into small bonded groups through energetically costly yet hilarious cosmetic rituals. One example, one of the women was sitting and browsing the catalog. 3 others were standing above her, sometimes 4, depending on whether there was someone with the authority to disperse them or not. And it worked like this. The person, a female colleague, came to work, and maybe it was straight after the first morning coffee or after the lunch break that she took the catalog out and, oh, I have a New Haven catalog. And now they all swarm together, laughs, the woman who was telling this story, and show me, show me. And they started to live through it. And now, I don't know, oh, what a lipstick. Look, this would suit me. Oh, no, this wouldn't suit you. And a similar hand gabble. Or another example. And then I felt we were like on the same wavelength. Then I really had the feeling that we were as if sisters or something like that, you know. It all gathered around the bed, and we were either sitting on the bed or kneeling around it, as if around the fire pit. And I remember such an emotion that we all smelled each other's perfumes, and it was very spontaneous and pretty mad. And we were so happy about it. What a fragrance and what a sample. That was great. I really enjoyed it very much. And it was fun. Like Annika was throwing at us those things, cosmetics, and we were squealing and I think we all knew that, wow, what are we doing, you know, but we really enjoyed it very much. So I tried to give you examples to illustrate what I was witnessing during my research that is very much unlike the rational instrumental shopping procedure that was supposed to be taking place. Well, these ritual situations happen spontaneously from below within the small collectives of cosmetic purchasers. They took place when the women were browsing catalogs and when the women were distributing the bought cosmetics, usually every 2 weeks. They could take place wherever women can carve space for them to take place. It could be work, cafes, cake shops, it could be home, it could be sauna. The length of these rituals lasted between 10 to 30 minutes, but I witnessed rituals that were up to 2 hours. Length of these rituals were often adjusted to the lunch breaks or work breaks women had at disposal. Result of these rituals was very well captured by one of my research participants, where she says, it was a very liberating feeling that maybe the world looks at women stereotypically, that a woman and cosmetics, that's like, but there we could really express it because we were among us and all of us knew that it was important to us. Thus, I wasn't scared to do, wow, what a fragrance, and open it straight away and smell it. And what cream is this? And so on. It was very familiar and so maybe bonding. Now, I'm going to link this material to this ethnographic material to Camilla Power's model of female cosmetics coalitions. According to this model, cosmetics are used and manipulated collectively in a costly ritual performance, and they provide mechanisms for establishing and marking reciprocal cooperative relations and obligations amongst women taking part in these rituals. Power places the emergence of the cosmetic coalition strategy in the African Middle Stone Age, when evolving human females were facing severe reproductive stress due to raising offspring with increasingly large brains. The purpose of this coalitionary strategy was to secure more male investment and provisioning via bright service type hunting for the offspring. The cosmetic ritual, cosmetic manipulation and ritual was a cosmetic manipulation and ritual advertising of the menstrual signal, which meant imminent fertility and was supposed to attract investor males. This signal had an economic value that would come in form of male investment. Every woman had to first pay the costs of entry, which meant resisting the discriminating non-investor males, proving her moral quality to the collective, and only then she would be able to gain the benefit of male investment when she would become pregnant and breastfeeding. These female cosmetic rituals generated the basis for the emergence of puberty rituals. Such ritual would then take place at the occasion of the girl's first menstruation, would be organized by the girl's female and male kin, and would advertise a young woman of maximum reproductive value and demonstrate the extent of her female kin support network. The characteristics of such ritual performance would be following. It would be a costly song and dance display, role-playing male, pantomiming animal movements and sounds, showing wrong species and wrong sex characteristic. We are not females, but males. We are not humans, but animals. In this ritual performance, they would also signal wrong time, meaning time outside of the fertile time of the ritual participant, that would result in sexual unavailability. The world would be turned upside down in these rituals, in terms of time, species, and sex, very similar to Bakhtin's analysis of carnival performances. Power shows the relevance of such rituals among contemporary hunter-gatherers. For example, in the Eland bull dance, girls' initiation amongst the Kalahari Bushmen, Maitoko girls' initiation amongst the East African Hadza, Elima girls' initiation amongst the Mambuti from East Central African forest region, and Ngoku, a female ritual amongst the Bayaka in Western Congo Basin. However, could we extend the relevance of this model on other ethnographic regions or on other women's groups? Now we can come back to my ethnographic data and look at the ritual and at the ritual template and analyze it and link it to Camilla's model, see whether we can do that. So the rituals I observed had stable elements that formed their ritual template, and these elements were always present in every ritual I observed or took part in. First, it was a seclusion of women present. Now, this seclusion could be in a separate room, in a flat. It could be created by the bodies of women, where they would show backs to the rest of the people present in the space they were occupying. Another element would be collective manipulation of cosmetics, which would include mutual touching, smelling, putting the cosmetics on. A very important part was sensory experience that centered on the body. Obligatory use of coded language that referred to cosmetics, beautification, and the female collective that was taking part in the ritual. And all this information was constructed as secret, belonging only to the women taking part in the ritual. Women taking part had to obligatorily share intimate information about their own bodies, beauties, flaws. Everything must have been revealed. Women collectively generated emotional high, hilarity. They were incredibly loud. They were laughing loudly. Their feminine behavior was exaggerated. They were ribald jokes. They bonded together. They shared and leveled up beautification and cosmetics. They tested regularly for the commitment to their group, and the purchases that they made were agreed collectively. So not an individual woman would have chosen an individual cosmetic and buy that one. She needed the approval of the whole group, and then she would buy the cosmetics. This template women learned while they were participating in these rituals. And interestingly, we've got the first link here. Girls start learning this ritual template at puberty from peers or female relatives. I came across an interesting study about tattoos in Mozambique, where young girls encouraged each other to get tattoos together as a way of bonding. Knowing this ritual template enabled the women to join any such female collective that formed in the context of direct sales cosmetics anywhere in Slovakia in a relatively short time span. Considering the mobility of these women, that many of them were professionals, it was a very good way for them how to gain allies in a new environment, new workplace, whenever they needed to. Now let's try to analyze what we just looked at. I'll start with Michal Bakhtin's work, Rabelais and his work, where he analyzes carnival performances. He suggests that this shared, uproarious, loud, hilarious laughter and jokes exhibit group leveling and collectivizing properties, and they can temporarily turn the existing world and its hierarchical order upside down, and a collective culture of reversal can emerge. Women referred to this situation of leveled hierarchies as being on the same wavelength, or being like sisters. In my research, all the women who took part, when they were in the ritual, they were like one. Head teachers, secretaries, junior, senior staff, all of the women present took part in the ritual, regardless of their hierarchy. And when they were in the ritual, the hierarchy wasn't important, it wasn't there. In these rituals emerged specific egalitarianism that I call ritual egalitarianism, because it was characteristic of the ritual situation that emerged. And this ritual egalitarianism centered on beauty and beautification, which meant that access to cosmetics was equalized, and the beautification of all women taking part was leveled up. They were all becoming as beautiful as possible, and they achieved it together as a group, as a collective. In the ritual, they reversed the mode of everyday working routine, of expected feminine behavior in its polarized feminine and masculine form. So when we look at these two columns, on the left-hand side, we've got expected everyday behavior. In the right-hand side column, we've got the ritual behavior that I observed. So when they are outside of ritual, women are serious. However, within the ritual, they are playful and joking. Outside the ritual, they're modest. In the ritual, they're immodest. And again, we have quiet as opposed to loud, individualistic as opposed to sharing, achievement-oriented and competitive as opposed to cooperative and committing to the collective, hierarchical, or respecting the hierarchical orders as opposed to leveled hierarchies, egalitarian and collectivized through cosmetic rituals, profit-oriented as opposed to giving up profit, where half of the representatives I worked with completely gave up profit and they were selling cosmetics at their cost price. And finally, feminine and available, as opposed to ambivalently feminine, not exactly feminine, but maybe with some other traits we'll see a bit later, and sexually unavailable. Now, Bakhtin, I'd like to explain why I chose Bakhtin. As a Russian scientist, he had a very good contact with the so-called, that you can find in the maybe Eastern ethnographic literature, traditional cultures, where we could firsthand observe carnivalesque style rituals that were still active or taking place in the peasant environment. Now, when I was studying ethnology at the Comenius University, we were taught in line with traditional peasant cultures, where the carnivalesque rituals were still present, even nowadays, especially during the winter period of the so-called Fasching time, or winter carnival period. And Bakhtin brings in a notion of so-called grotesque body. It's a body that is ritualized and collective and collectivizing. It's like the body of all the people. And this body has specific characteristics. It's big. Many body parts are big, big noses, big breasts, big buttocks. This grotesque body stresses the lower bodily stratum. Importantly, this body is always transgressive and it's always dualistic. It combines logical opposite of both old and young, male and female, human and animal. So here, with maybe some other words, we have said the same argument that Camilla Power brings forward, that when we have this specific type of ritual, we will have this wrong sex, wrong species, and wrong time signature. This grotesque body opposes and transgresses the body outside of the ritual, which is individual, body of every day. This body then represents the ritual reversal of everyday attributes, in our case of everyday feminine attributes of attractiveness, and culminates in the unattractiveness and therefore sexual unavailability of women taking part in these carnivalesque, hilarious rituals. Now, following the analysis of Khoisan and Hadza initiation ritual, Power and Watts say exactly the same as Bakhtin did for the ethnographic material of peasant culture, of European peasant cultures, that such gender ambiguity comes to existence in such hilarious carnivals rituals. And this gender ambiguity is a property of ritual gender of power, where ritual potency derives from a unified gender with both male and female characteristics. Similar characteristics, although not theorized as Camilla Power and in this case Power and Watts have, were noticed by Sanders, Gluckman, also in Slovak ethnographic materials by Bogatyryov, Oleszczak and Sirovatka. In these rituals, women collectively transgress the ordinary habitus of feminine behavior. In the ritual performance, cosmetic purchases created a ritually specific hyperfemininity that opposed and exaggerated the expectations of everyday femininity associated with work and relations with men. No woman on her own, outside of ritual situation, would do what we had the chance to see in the examples, although just reading the examples, the actual power of the situation is much diminished, I must say. But outside of ritual situation, no woman would do what they were doing when they were throwing cosmetics at each other and screaming and so on. As one of my research participants said, they were like crows swooping down on the cosmetics with exaggerated gestures, amplified communications up to the point of squealing, laughing uproariously. Women themselves recognized that their behavior was far from ordinary. They said things like, "We all knew that, wow, what are we doing?" Or, "It was pretty mad." Within this ritual performance, women incorporated the attributes of masculine assertiveness. For example, beer drinking, as my research participant said, that's what men drink while watching football, or throw and catch game with cosmetics, or simply womanly unflattering positions while they were all together within the ritual. Collective ritual performance of both male and female that generated gender of power, that unified both of these categories. Now, within these ritual performances, a very important part was represented by sharing. And this sharing operated here as an equalizing mechanism. It took place within these bonded collectives, coalitions of fictive sisters when they were in cosmetic rituals. It was very thorough, it was obligatory, and it was ritualized. It was also very carefully monitored by all the ritual participants. It was assertive or vigilant sharing as theorized by Woodburn, Boehm, or Edel and Whiten. And exactly to ensure appropriate shares. As women themselves said, when the cosmetic was there, it was all about watching. They watched each other's behavior to assess how well they share. Because this sharing operated as a mechanism of a fine-tuned equalization, leveling up of beauty and beautification of all the women in the coalition. During this sharing, women also tested for the group commitment. It was also a counter-dominance mechanism, preventing any individual woman from becoming dominant or more beautiful than other women. It also represented the morality of the circulation of cosmetics within the female collectives. If any sort of accumulation happened in this context, it was condemned by the cosmetic purchasers as immoral. For example, representatives who sold cosmetics with gain without any compensation were condemned as immoral representatives. Cosmetic purchasers shared cosmetics by trying them on, and this sharing could be offered or it could be on demand. They were asked to share, usually by simple questions saying, "Can I smell it?" or "Have you got a cream?" They also shared their beauty flaws that automatically were followed by best possible beauty tips. All this information were constructed as scarce and therefore secret and belonging only to the collective. They also shared decisions about purchases. As they said, we all agree on who will order what, and they shared the purchases themselves. Often, all of them within the group ordered exactly the same thing, 1, 2, sometimes more. This ritual egalitarianism that came to being within these ritual situations was also maintained by women checking on their own relative volumes of ordered cosmetics by comparing their orders to cosmetics other women purchased. As one research participant put it, "When I got the ordered cosmetics, I checked who ordered what among the other girls and whether I'm in the upper or the lower line." Through this, participating women showed their cooperative intentions and respect for the ritual egalitarianism of cosmetic sharing within their collective. They on purpose avoid appearing dominant or achieving higher levels of access to cosmetic resources than their girlfriends. Whereas competition implies hierarchies, collectively shared beautification implies egalitarian approach to beauty and beautification. This sharing resulted in equalized distribution of cosmetics and beauty knowledge among the women in the respective collectives that I studied. I would like to talk also a little bit about the women's collective agency that links to some hunter-gatherer female rituals, but not only hunter-gatherer female rituals. I will at the end briefly discuss rituals found in industrial societies that have the same attributes. Now, we were talking about the grotesque body, the ritually established grotesque body. In Bakhtin's view, this body is always transgressive. And as Finnegan pointed out, such collective body of all the people carries with it subversive bodily counterpower. Now, Finnegan did her research among the Yaka, Baka, Mendele female collectives, where she noticed that these collective ritual performances run by beautified women had the power to undermine male domination and to temporarily assert power through ritual repartee. Men were expected to withdraw and free the social space for women. In these rituals, women stressed bodily openness, egalitarianism, and ambivalent beauty, also the power of sex and procreation. Now, similar situation analyzed power amongst the Hadza, where collective female ritual counteraction was part of initiation and epime rituals. In these rituals, women and girls as a group would chase away men with sticks and contest men's claims to control ritual power. Now, among the cosmetic purchasers, I observed a situation where women temporarily claimed the office space from men through the medium of ritual performance. Men, of course, would kind of fight back through taunting and teasing the women. However, women armed with a catalogue would use their collective body in ritual mode and its agency to seize the social space. They were beautified, yet assertive, loud, raucous, joking, and laughing. And as one of my research participants said, men would thoroughly avoid everything associated with these collective cosmetic rituals. They were scared of it as if it was a plague, because Avon catalogue is like a stamp and they wouldn't even touch it. So in this ritual, women would just seize the center stage, do their ritual despite the objections of their male colleagues, be wild, have a lot of fun, go through the catalogue, go through their cosmetics, and only when they considered the ritual to be accomplished, they would stop and go back to their seats and continue the work. And then the gender hierarchies could resume. We could see these ritual, these collective cosmetics rituals as opportunities to temporarily equalize the working relationships between female and male co-workers within the ritual domain. They reversed, for the time being of the ritual performance, the relationships of dominance. Women managed to generate reverse dominance hierarchy, according to Boehm, where women collectively as a group, through their cosmetic ritual, control the office space. However, this control needs to be seen as temporary interruptions of the office everyday routine. Now, a similar situation was observed and analyzed by Skeks in her work, Formation of Class and Gender, Becoming Respectable, where she studied working class women and their social culture in a Northwest English town. And she also noticed the ambivalent she calls it ambivalent femininities, where the femininity is feminine, but it's not exactly feminine because there's something else to it. And she, very similarly to my research, observed two occasions where these rituals would take place. One occasion would be Saturday shopping expeditions that would correspond to the collective cosmetic rituals of my research participants, which, as Beverly Skeggs would put it, was a collective quest of a group of girlfriends for feminine appearance, vested with meanings of sharing, intimacy, solidarity, hilarity, and she adds also signaling desirability. Now, this signaling desirability, we need to understand that it was taking place within this collective cosmetic ritual amongst the women themselves. No men were present. However, this appearance, according to Skeggs, was strongly in contrast with the Saturday night out collective performance of the femininity, where women stress camaraderie amongst each other, shared laughter, jokes. They were raucous, rude, outrageous, challenging the femininity, and women collectively claim their right to social space and pleasure. So this second part would be the part of the female collective agency, where women collectively, as a group, seize the social space during their ritual performance. Okay. Well, in my talk, I try to provide a link between Camilla Power's female cosmetic coalitions model and social worlds of women in contemporary industrial societies that might not be as visible and as well studied, yet they are still there. We've seen it on an example of Slovak women. Here we've got an example of Saturday night girls out among British women. Another example could be the hen parties that used to take place at women's workplaces, and now they move to pubs, more or less. There's an interesting book on this by Sally Westwood, All Day, Every Day, Factory and Family in the Making of Women's Life. Yeah, I think I managed to provide the links, and if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Thank you so much, Ellie. It's amazing to hear about female cosmetic coalitions alive and well in the heart of industrial or post-industrial Europe. It's fantastic. Does anybody want to ask Ellie questions about this? It's actually pretty fascinating because there is so much kind of from feminists attack on the idea that cosmetics can actually bring women power. A typical kind of feminist viewpoint is that women are being duped into a kind of sexist, stereotypical hierarchy, and they're being duped of their money by capitalism, only utilizing, only just trying to take profits from women's stupid ideas about beauty. And Ellie, or the women that she's been studying, is really subverting this whole idea because, well, I mean, in terms of economics, the women are actually on strike against capitalism in some sense, and they are refusing to allow profiteering to go on. So yeah, Mark, brilliant to see you. Do you want to ask something?
Hi Ellie, thanks for that. That was really interesting. One of the things I think, because as you know, I may know, or some of you know, that I've been doing work on female coalitions in relation to the mosquito, and I've looked at a number of manifestations of how this kind of female solidarity works in relation to rituals. Like there's the Kitty Alley, where all the women of the community have this game, which is kind of like a form of deep play against men, once a year. And then there's baseball tournaments where find a kind of again, women's solidarity in particular communities, or the women come together, even though that in ordinary day-to-day life that those baseball teams may represent a number of different coalitions which are hostile to one another, even hostile, but may come together. But one of the things I've been looking at is what happens when you have a breach in that kind of solidarity. And you alluded to that, I think, in your talk about, when perhaps somebody said something a little bit out of order, and so on. And the example I was thinking was for the mosquito was that you have these groups of, if you like, small matrilineages, which potentially segment into smaller matrilineages for the mosquito. And one example that I had, which is actually kind of quite, might be quite interesting for you and Camilla, in the sense that it represents a form of beauty magic, is that one of the a young woman in her early 20s, in one of these matrilineages, she started to say that she was going to buy clothes and sell them. Basically, her brother-in-law was a big shot cocaine narco trafficker, and so she had lots of money and was going to put together all these clothes and sell them. But she made the mistake of what she did was she made the mistake of alienating a lot of the other women by, you couldn't resist in her Facebook making fun of these sort of other mosquito girls in the community who were, dressed in sort of much less fancy clothes and sometimes even rags. And she took one of her cousin in her group, her mother's sister's daughter, in other words, part of the same group. She made fun of her for always wearing the same red dress, sort of thing. And of course, there's a thing, mosquito women are said to like red a lot. So this was like perceived as an attack on mosquito womanhood, sort of thing. And so what the mother of this, the grandmother of this girl, who sort of took this, what she caught hold of this girl who put this thing on the Facebook, making fun of the other. She took her, threw her to the ground and started thumping her up. And she said, "Oh, how are you going to do that, Auntie? You're, And she said, "Well, you're not acting like my niece," kind of thing. And it's often through these kind of breaches that you learn something about, how these things are actually perceived. And I wondered, in some of the instances that you were talking about, where maybe somebody says something out of line, whether you might have some examples that perhaps tell us something about those coalitions.
Okay, I first react to Mark, and then I'd like to say something to Camilla's comment. I'm not sure whether I get correctly Mark's question. Is it about what happened in the instances when women breached the moral code of the coalition?
Yeah, precisely. Yeah, they step out.
I must say I came across such breach only once, and the woman was very reluctant talking about it because she felt she was excluded from such coalition, and she was very bitter about it, that the woman who used to bring the catalogue to work is not offering it to her anymore. And I wasn't digging deep enough because I didn't feel it was appropriate at that time, but they do happen. And if judging from this one example, it would mean the end of being part of such coalition. Now, these coalitions are, I'd say, flexible in the way that, unlike the girls' initiation rituals, which form a coalition for life, these coalitions can form and disperse again, and then reform again during the woman's life. So one woman can be part of several coalitions during her lifetime, sometimes more at the same time. She can engage with those girlfriends, she can engage with those girlfriends. And maybe that's why the regular 2-weekly checking on their commitment to coalition, to check whether she's still with them, whether she's still performing according to the moral standards of the female collective. So that's what came to my mind to try to answer Mark's question.
Yeah.
And also about Camilla, you mentioned the feminists and how they see women being pushed into buying cosmetics by the capitalist system and they're being exploited and so on. I think at one level, these feminist scholars don't get it completely wrong when they consider woman as an individual, when they see just this individual, one woman, being swirled in the, I don't know, pan of these beautiful images, and then you need to be like this, you need to have boobs like that, and buttocks like that, and hair like this, and lipstick like that. But as soon as you become part of the group of other women, that group will support you, that group will tell you, don't do that, won't look good on you. If you want to try something else, try this. And I think there have been a few studies in the 1980s and 90s that did this comparison between white American women who were mainly individualized, isolated, and dragged into this vicious circle. And they contrasted this with African American women and Latino American women. These last two mentioned were embedded in the collectives of their peers, and their reaction to the mass media consumption, cosmetic cultures were completely different. The collective supported them and didn't let them to feel bad about themselves, about their bodies, about their looks, and so on. So I think there's a difference between a woman on her own and a woman as part of the group that supports her. I think there's a massive difference in this.
Denise, you gonna comment?
Very interesting talk. I just wondered whether in some of the groups, whether you had mother-daughter and relationships, or whether they're just all peer groups. Because I remember in our women's groups that apart from sharing makeup, we would also smell the old powder puffs because they reminded us of our mothers and the mother's smell, and particularly those big powder puffs that looked like breasts, and you dipped it in this powder, and it was it was very sensual, and it gave us this memory, you know, of the mothers. Now I just wonder whether there's any of that in it at all or not.
Thank you for your question. Yes, these coalitions were not just peer coalitions, but they were often other female relatives coalitions as well. So some coalitions could be taking place at secondary schools with the onset of puberty in girls. That would be peer coalitions. But often, because the girls didn't have the age that would allow them to be representatives themselves, they would bring the catalogue through other female relatives who were older, mothers or aunts. And also within the coalition, everybody could be involved who wanted to take part. Would be sisters, would be mums, would be cousins, would be aunts, would be also workmates of different ages. So yeah, it's not just peer, it's goes across generations.
Are there any men brave enough to ask some questions? Just as Ellie is saying about the men wouldn't even touch the catalogue. It's like it's this sacred or terribly or polluted object that they couldn't touch it. Any brave men?
Maybe the fear is that if you touch the catalogue, you might get pregnant or something like that.
Maybe not pregnant, but not manly enough. You'll use you will lose your manliness.
You definitely lose your whatsits if you get too close to all that stuff. Yeah. I mean, for me, just the vision that I can never forget of a female cosmetic coalition was during the Dockers disputes, when I used to go up to Liverpool every Friday night, and I was taken out by my friend Billy Jenks, the Docker. He just wanted to show me what goes on. We just went down towards the port, and it just, I don't know, I've never seen anything like it. You just saw the whole street taken over by wave upon wave upon wave of girls, I don't know, late teens, mid-teens, I suppose, all arm in arm, all wearing their war paint. I mean, the makeup was just absolutely astonishing. And it doesn't matter how cold it was, their skirts hardly covered their bottoms. And they were just on the warpath, hunting for boys. There's just no question what they were doing. And they were just doing it together. And it just seems to me that somehow that for us, for whatever reason, the word cosmetics, just despite the fact that it's actually design, and we in our book club we were thinking about Peter Gow's marvelous work on the Kigamala, the girl's first menstruation ritual among the Piro in Peru, where you either have blotches, which would be sort of just a mess, and the idea there is that menstrual bleeding would be just a blotch and a mess, or you have the opposite, which is design. And design is has to be communal. You need others to give you the design. You can't just put design on your own face. And design is just hugely potent. And of course, but I mean, okay, just another sort of example. I mean, one of the people that I worked with quite closely was Christine Binney, with her neo-naturist version of feminism, and she just loved wearing not a lot at all, hardly anything. She was on the warpath with her friends, but they would deliberately be lipstick all over the place, but all kind of in the wrong place, all smeared all over the place, and all kinds of blotchy, aggressive, assertive wall paint, and it really looked like wall paint. So you have this kind of this dialectic, I suppose, between design, which is sort of harmony, and of course, as Camilla's pointed out, the word cosmetics implies harmony. It implies the cosmos. It means you're in harmony with each other, and therefore sort of in harmony with the celestial spheres, with the universe. And cosmetics should be, is like intrinsically, the very word is telling us that cosmetics is design and harmony. And of course, the harmony is the harmony between the women and themselves. And it's, as you were saying, Ellie, it's quite ambivalent. It's not that it's certainly not that it's not sexual. It's hugely provocatively, erotically sexual, but it's for women. It's like a women's weaponry to get men to do what women need those men to do, which is certainly admire them, but it's in a way which makes very, very clear who's kind of on top for the period of the ritual. And so it's establishing your power through this wall paint. I like the term wall paint. I think that's perhaps captures it best.
I think the wall paint also points to the ambivalent nature of women being women when they're in ritual, because the wall paint is also very assertive as compared to feminine. So there are already these two aspects of male, of female and feminine, and not exactly female and feminine. And getting men to do what women want them to do, that in my view would be the next step after establishing support of their girlfriends through wall paint, as you said, Chris. Then the next step would be maybe to adjust the wall paint a little bit, to be a bit more to the sweeter side before the wall paint will be put on again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Perhaps, Eddie, tell us a little bit about the problems you have, because as I understand it, I mean, and perhaps share this, I kind of understand that when you were doing this research in Slovakia, and you did mention the Comenius University and their focus on traditional peasant culture and rituals, am I right in saying that you didn't get too much understanding and support from senior colleagues or professors in Comenius? And if so, kind of why? What was the issue? I mean, maybe you don't want to talk about that, but possibly you do, because I gather you eventually found University of East London and Camilla as a more
and Mark, Camilla and Mark.
And Mark, of course, yes. Sorry, yes, as a I don't know, a more friendly environment, shall we say?
Yeah.
I don't want to be too. I don't want to be very direct about this,
no.
But yeah, by what I can say, by great men as Sarah Hurley would have had it. A great man at that university was very angry about me doing this, presenting my research while defending my thesis that was already written. And this great man said, I'm sure, he said this, I don't know how they do it, but I'm sure they don't do it the way you say it. So that was the reaction of one of the great men that I met during my studies there. Yeah, and also it wasn't considered as research worthy, this topic, interestingly.
It was not considered research worthy.
Yeah, it wasn't considered research.
Because it's too trivial. I mean, just Avon catalogues and stuff is just not serious ethnography, whereas you go to the countryside and found some traditional peasant dance that's worthy of ethnographic study.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the second part, but I was told that why don't I pick up something that's more research worthy.
Jacob?
Yes, thank you. First of all, I work in the theater, and so we have a lot of makeup, and we have seclusion backstage, gender seclusion. So we have a female dressing room and a male dressing room. And in those rooms, there is a lot of makeup being applied to each other. And the sounds that come out of the women's dressing room are wrong time, wrong sex, wrong species. And if you are not in that dressing room, you do not go in that dressing room without an invitation. But also the sounds change periodically. The nature of that room is on a cycle. And what we have in the theater, which I was really shocked coming into this group and finding that medical science has not figured it out yet, but we have menstrual synchrony in just about every show I've done in the last 25 years of my life. If there's more than 2 women in the show, they sync up. And so the ritual of putting on makeup and changing your character collectively, even that goes through a periodicity of what that ritual is. And I was wondering if your studies were finding anything with menstrual synchrony with these women, with these small groups of women, with makeup, with ritual, with changing the mask, with touching, and changing behavior, because we also sing together and we dance together. So we have a whole lot of other things that might be at play there, and we're doing it at night. But if you found that menstrual synchrony coming in the groups, if that was something that was part of what was being looked at.
I must say, I wasn't looking at menstrual synchrony for very simple, practical reasons. I was working in a 500,000 big town, and I was working with 16 different groups, and I had allocated time within my PhD program when I had to complete my research So there wasn't enough time to do that, to be honest. Maybe if I had a team of researchers, could have been done, but certainly would have been very interesting. Would be very interesting, yeah.
But Ellie, was there any kind of because you've described sometimes the sort of the real intimacy of the discourse, and as you said, people are revealing these very intimate secrets. So I don't know if there was anything that was even touching on menstrual cycles or anything like that.
Yeah, they were talking about menstruation and cycles and problems and pains and everything that they were concerned about would be spoken of.
Mm-hmm. I think that would
yeah, that was a normal part of the conversation amongst those women.
Denise asked about mother-daughter relationships, and I was just wondering about mother and son relationships, or small boys, because I mean, men, when they're related to the women by being members of their own kin, whether they're a son or a brother, would have a different relationship to their partners and boyfriends and so forth. So I just wondered what the mother-son relationship was, and whether the women in these rituals, their kind of orientation of their kinship changed. So were they spending more time with their blood kin or something along those lines?
I don't know what the relationships between mothers and sons were amongst the women I researched, because I focused on women being together as allies, as a group of supportive girlfriends. But about the kinship, maybe I didn't stress it enough in my talk. These collectives, these collective rituals generated amongst the women a quasi kinship ties. As one of my research participants said, they were like sisters, although they weren't blood sisters. But through these ritual performances, they became like sisters. And very interesting, there was one group of young women I worked more closely with. And what happened throughout, I'm still in touch with them. And what happened throughout the years, now they have babies. And what happened is they support each other through childcare. So they look after their kids. They give each other lifts, whatever help they need to be done to help with the kids, with the childcare, these women within this group do. So ultimately, in line with Camilla's argument, and also with Sarah Hardy's argumentation, these cosmetic coalitions ultimately do perform or do extend into childcare and childcare support. So this could be maybe the kinship link coming out of my talk.
What do you think about going on to the future with this work, or what ideas you have for research in the future?
Well, if I ever get there, I would very much like to do research again in an urban environment, and I'd like to look at cooperative networks of women in these urban environments, and what's happening there, where how important they are in relation to childcare. That's what I'd like to look at.
Yeah. Can I just say, I don't understand why you haven't published this work. I mean, perhaps you have published it, but it's, I mean, it's so
no,
interesting.
I haven't published.
So
you're right. Yeah. That's,
what's the matter?
That's
That's
my.
important.
Maybe I suppose having kids does put a certain break on things, I suppose, but it shouldn't be that take much time to write all that up and put it in the Journal of the Royal Anthropological Institute or some equally prestigious publication.
I'll do that next. I'll do that after this talk.
Great.
Thank you very much.
It's extremely important and research worthy. So yeah, it should be definitely. But it is saying something very powerful if you actually can track the evidence of the coalitions from work in office or that sort of environment that carries through to childcare networks or many years later. I mean, that is pretty remarkable. That's quite extraordinary. Tam.
Yeah. It was very interesting because this coalition that carried over to child care, it started at a very different place, 8 to 10 hours train ride away from Bratislava, the capital, and then dispersed and then reconfigured in Bratislava. A few others joined in. So it was, it also shows the history of this type of coalition, life history of this type of coalition that can start, disperse, regroup, others can come in, as long as the costly ritual template is done correctly, the new members can be admitted. And yeah, this one extended up to the childcare.
Pam, go for it.
Hi, Elena. I'm sorry. I've been on another Zoom for organising trade union activities, so I've missed most of it, I'm afraid to say. But I will definitely. I see it has been recorded. Go for the recording because it was a very big thing in my household. My mum was a member of a Avon group locally in the 60s, but especially through the 1970s. It was a very big thing in the community when I grew up. And yes, we were all excluded as the boys as well as the men, and they were having a great time. That's for sure. So I'm intrigued because I had thought it was something that had its day with Avon, and that it was only really, it sort of maybe died out in the 1970s, but maybe you go beyond Avon, but you're certainly talking about that. I know that as a company, they still exist because the one thing they're sort of famed for, there's an Avon product that is the only sure cure for dealing with midges in Scotland, the insects over the west coast of Scotland. There is a particular Avon product that is the only one that anybody's ever thought actually works for getting rid of midges. Yeah. So they're obviously some company, but I do really look forward to because I think the whole sense of sort of working class female culture is something that is sort of treated so disparagingly so much of the time, and the sense of collectivity is so strong there, and even just the being able to put on makeup and day to day, the idea that you can be transformative is a power in itself, I think, rather than as Camilla raised about, just looked on as if it's conformity rather than transformity, if there is such a word. Yeah,
it's interesting because in 1970s we didn't have Avon then. Avon came to Slovakia in the mid 1990s, and in the second half of the 1990s, I think it was its popularity was the highest. But very interestingly, it's still there, and women still use it. And also the working class environment is very interesting that in Slovakia it's not necessarily working class women, it's any woman actually. Could be working class, could be middle class. I had women who worked as cleaners, I had university students, I had managers, I had researchers. So in Slovakia, it really cuts across generations and classes, seems to be.
Okay. Yeah, well, this was in Scotland in 1970s, I think. Yeah, it was at its peak, probably. Yeah. In Edinburgh. Mm-hmm. I remember the advert as well. Ding dong, Avon calling. Yeah. Yeah.
More in the chat here. Oh, there, Rosalie, you say your male tutor was selling. That's really unusual. Man selling the cosmetics. Don't know what's going on there.
I hope he survives. I hope he survived intact with all his bits.
Yeah, that's unusual. Joe, do you want to say anything about it? Because I'm a bit like you. I have a very little experience of collective cosmetics. That's probably why I've done lots of research on it. Yeah, the women who are using these collective cosmetics can seem very intimidating for outsiders. And of course, the female cosmetic coalitions model is about potential rivalry between particular coalitions. There is the solidarity may just be within a coalition. It doesn't necessarily go outside. That's the idea. Yeah. So it's kind of got a lot of contradictory aspects to it, but it's very interesting in Ellie's work that these networks seem to have real flexibility, and because, as she's saying, the template is so similar, it's possible for women to move from one coalition to another coalition, and that's particularly interesting. That really is, and that would correspond a lot to the sort of template you have with African women's initiation, where women kind of learn the secrets, and then once they have those secrets, they can move to other places and share those secrets elsewhere. So it overcomes the limitations of just a kin group. It goes further than it. You can carry kinship with you because you've got the ritual template. Is kind of how it goes. Kind of how it goes. Anyone else want to?
Just that over in my part of the world, nail bars are a huge thing. I mean, really. I mean, the closure of the nail bars over COVID was a massive, oh, yeah. Downer on the local economy, and it's not just nails, of course. It's this, I mean, extraordinary extension of eyelashes. I mean, eyelashes now seem to be kind of, I don't know, as long as half your finger, flipping up and down, and they're just so obviously fake. And yet they certainly work. I mean, you can definitely understand why these very long eyelashes, as they pop up and down, they're really very seductive. And but does Avon do that? That's one question. But another question is, I suppose, a lot of that, everything in your descriptions, a lot depended on the catalogue. And I presume with smartphones, you just tap on your smartphone. I imagine that you don't actually have a huge paper catalogue any longer. So eyelashes and catalogues, just questions about moved on. Since,
I'm not sure about the eyelashes, whether Avon sell them. It's possible. I haven't seen an Avon catalogue for quite a while, I must say that. It would be interesting to see whether women still do catalogs or whether they prefer smartphones. When I was doing the research, it wasn't the smartphone time yet. So it was paper catalog. That was about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So, don't know.
Have we got any other comments coming up? Because it is Amy, come in.
Yeah, I worked as a makeup artist for a very long time and always found that it was really that women were gathering to share secrets to wear makeup for other women. Like, it was very rare that I was like helping a woman pick the perfect brow cream so she could impress a man with her eyebrows. But I'm very curious. In my experience, Chris made me think of this talking about nails. Like, when I worked in wardrobe, like the sound engineer sold like press-on nail stickers. And so other women at work would host parties for her where she would go and sell. So it became this sort of cyclical structure. But I'm very curious in this model of like, it's a workplace where women are already working together. I'm curious about how the relationship with money plays into developing kinship or developing, or if it's developing any divides in this modern coalition.
Very good question, Amy. Many thanks. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. I would like to say first that selling of Avon cosmetics within the small collectives of women I studied was done in a very specific way, in which it had to be done morally, which means the profit for the representative must have been endowed with specific properties as not to appear or not to be seen as the main motivation of the representative to sell cosmetics to the women. So half of the representatives refrained from making profit altogether. So they were selling the cosmetic at the cost price. For the money that they bought it from the firm, they sold it at the exact same price to the women. So she made zero profit. There were another half who did make profit. However, they adopted several strategies to show to the group of women that they are not there to exploit them and to make profit out of them. For example, the women had to find the representative and directly ask for the catalog. She wouldn't come in and say, here's a new Avon catalog, choose something. The representative would also restrict the number of clients to what one of my research participant calls my better girlfriends. So she would sell it to her better girlfriends, not to anybody else. It was reserved for the women she was close to. She wouldn't expand her networks. She wouldn't advertise. It was just for the trusted ones. Another strategy was to create debts, which means that the Avon company provided a window of 2 weeks within which the representative was expected to pay for the product that she bought from the firm and then sold on to the women. What the representatives did was that they stretched this window to the maximum as not to ask money from the coalition members too early. Even if some of them would come to the representative and say, I have money here, or how much do I owe you? The representative was expected to say, oh, you still have time, or you don't give it to me right now, you give it to me later. So, and this indebtedness, of course, would create this reciprocity relationships between the women. So there were ways how to turn money and profit into something that is moral, into something that supports the fictive kinship ties amongst the women.
Mark,
you want to?
Yeah, that's very interesting, and I think when I was looking at, I mean, I wasn't studying it, but I saw people I know in Nicaragua, you know, in the faraway Mosquito community, where they still have Avon representatives, and people are bringing the products up by canoe to other communities and things like that. And but one of the things that you sort of talked about is this tension between, on the one hand, being part of the coalition, being part of that sort of, if you like, moral coalition, and on the other hand, trying to make some money out of it. And it's a very sort of, it strikes me that to do that is very, very difficult. It's a very kind of fine balancing act to be able to, on the one hand, make some money out of it, but on the other hand, you know, satisfy the community in terms of its, you know, moral imperatives or whatever. And I remember one young woman who was doing this, and she was phoning up the company because she was, you know, she was getting into the hole because she had wanted to got into it to try and make some money, but was being drawn into the sort of sisterhood, if you like, and, you know, more of that, and she wasn't really making enough money to pay back, you know, what she'd taken out in credit. And she was bringing it and saying, oh, this is just too much abonismo, you know. What she meant by that was that, that, you know, that the demands for the company were really kind of, she found them very difficult to satisfy both those and membership of the coalition. So it strikes me as perhaps it's much easier simply to be a member than it is to be someone who's essentially supplying the coalition, as it were.
Yeah, it's interesting. I worked with some representatives who, when they started with the group, they would be selling for profit, but as they got drawn into the coalition, and they just stopped. They just started to sell it at a cost price, and they just couldn't make the profit anymore. They just couldn't sell it for the price displayed in the catalogue. So that's interesting. It does work. There was too much abonismo for them as well, I think.
I wonder if many of them, I've seen this a few times in Nicaragua, if some of them managed to get into the hole because of this. When they say to get into the hole, that they got into a little bit of, you know, debt with it because of this.
So I don't know if there's any more questions, but I was just going to bring out the aspect of the, you know, what is the real value, because there evidently isn't profiteering or money making out of this. Is the real value in this sharing of the beauty tips to create that solidarity, and that evidently the beauty tips have a real value, because there's a bit of an argument on the chat here about whether women are putting the makeup on for themselves or putting it on for men. But quite clearly the beauty tips, when the women go away from their coalitions and are meeting male partners, or even could be female partners, they are then putting those tips to work and getting the results, presumably getting the results, presumably it's actually worth it for them. So there's some discussion on the chat about whether you can actually create solidarity here with this beautification. But quite clearly, Ellie was finding yes, you can create solidarity. I don't know if you want to say more.
Yeah, I think what Camilla said, that's how it works. When women are in the ritual, then the makeup that's circulating there is for them. All the beauty tips they get from their girlfriends, how to put it on, what's the best color, how it looks like on me, what can I change, what can I improve. However, once they leave the ritual situation, all these tips that they've got from their girlfriends, they can apply to get the economic value of the signal, if we want to go back to the Camilla's model. And then they can apply it in their relations with men, of course. But I think we need to distinguish these two situations: the ritual one, which is there for bonding with other women, and then the everyday feminine beauty, because the bonding beauty is feminine, but with a little bit of difference, with a little bit of being a little bit of maybe assertive and not in the mood for adventures or romantic relationship at that particular time. That's the ritual time for women only. And then the everyday femininity is that takes over when women step out of the ritual situation, and then they apply makeup to be feminine without the addition of assertiveness and hilarity and rudeness and ritual power.
Are we coming to an end, or are there people still with some more questions for discussion here? It's still a very so there's still quite a lot of disagreement going on in the chat about the whole thing, but I don't know if anybody wants to say anything out of there. Give me a chance.
Maybe if I can say something, to me it looks like maybe there's what transpires through the lines might be the competition between different coalitions of women. Because the model would predict women within the coalition cooperate, but there's competition going on between different coalitions. Sometimes some women wear less makeup or no makeup. Sometimes women wear more makeup, might go that way, maybe. What do you think, Camilla?
I'm not sure I'm the best expert here to talk about modern cosmetics use, but yeah, that it's quite probable that in creating their coalitions, women are creating a certain style or look or something that they kind of meet on, that they share, and it's almost like an identity of some sort, and that women who have different styles and different kind of ways of doing things, they will be quite distinct coalitions, and potentially, you know, not be very cooperative between each other. That's potentially true. But what's really interesting here is that we're talking about cosmetics. I mean, just let's put it into the framework of the ancient, the Middle Stone Age of Africa. These cosmetics are they're the earliest symbolic materials of humanity, the red ochre and associated substances for creating body paint. I'm actually in a few weeks going to do a talk on beauty magic, which will go back to that model and talk about the evidence on it. But this is the creation with this material culture. This was the creation for broad, wide-scale, cross-landscape cooperation, and it's kind of no wonder, but it is still amazing that across 100,000 years and more than 100,000 years, that mechanism of creating cooperation amongst women remains, is still there, and well, in terms of our evolved psychology, it isn't a surprise it's still there, but it's still pretty amazing that it should be, and so it's really, it's really worth hearing about how it's still there, how it still works. So yeah. There's still some questions for Rosalie, saying perhaps these rival coalitions might include women who don't use cosmetics against those who do. There's very little doubt that women's use of cosmetics gives them, quite specific identity to quite specific communities, and it's very diverse. It's very diverse. As we already touched.
I just had an idea. I worked with one group, and there, for example, they were buying cosmetics, but they hardly used it. There was one lady, she would just use a blue pencil for her eye. That was it. But then she would still be with her girlfriends buying masses of cosmetics and then never use it. So that's also a way how to look it. So she would show clearly in a costly and reliable way her commitment to the coalition, and then hardly use it with her husband or with her other surroundings. But within the ritual, she'd buy loads and quite expensive. So that's another way how to look at it as well.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
When I was in Leipzig, when was I in Leipzig? Was it 2006? Not all that. Oh, yes, I mean, obviously eons ago, but it's just so interesting that in East Germany, all the stuff which had happened in where I live here like 20 years ago, all the sort of all the goths and the punks and all the different tribes were all just hitting the scene. They're all becoming hugely happening in over here. So I mean, we've just been talking about different ways of putting on cosmetics, but I'm just thinking of all the safety pins in girls' lips and noses and ears and all this extraordinary goth kind of much more than makeup, of course. I mean, those things are also, I mean, they're huge coalitions, obviously not necessarily exclusively female coalitions. If you're a goth, everyone's a goth, and if you're a punk, everyone's a punk. But just another dimension, just emphasizing this point that Eastern Europe and Western Europe are on different time schedules with these things.
Yeah, with certain things, yes.
Amy, did you want to come in again? Sorry.
Yeah. I guess thinking about Avon specifically, you're not just looking at a company that's selling makeup. You know, they're very broad in their generational appeal, and now they sell a lot of skincare products and supplements. And so there's not just the appeal of makeup, but there's also the appeal of skincare and taking care of your skin and your health. And that like I know parties that I've gone to, women who don't wear makeup will buy it as gifts, or be like, oh, my niece's birthday is coming up, what do I think what would be fun to get her from this. But it's also making me think about when I was in cosmetology school, they started to notice this trend in the United States that barbershops became a very good place to raise awareness for men's heart disease, because men were able to enter into a relationship with their barber in the chair where they could talk honestly about their health without any of the pressure of speaking with a doctor. And I think a very similar thing, you know, in the way we were talking about menstruation and menstrual synchrony in the coalition, but that even for women not wearing makeup, being able to talk about skin health and how that is relating to the rest of the health of their body or health of their family, and like how that gets into talking about what they're eating and all these other things that become a very comfortable community of solidarity that they wouldn't necessarily have with their family or with their doctor. And that becomes another important social feature.
Yes, actually in my mother tongue, the word cosmetics doesn't only mean makeup style cosmetics, but it also means skincare and body care products. So it covers both aspects, and the women I worked with were buying both, not just cosmetics, decorative cosmetics, but also body care and skincare. And yeah, it depends. I worked with one group, and they were also interested in their health and dieting, and they all did it together. So yeah.
Well, I think it's time we said thank you very much to Elena Fedyorova for that. It's been a really fascinating I've heard Ellie's work a lot before, but it always strikes me with more details every time that I hear her talk about it. And I think it's such a really important subject. Just to say, for next week, we have a really interesting talk from Helga Wierig, who has fieldwork with Kwa Bushmen. And I hope that Helga might be able to tell us something about the women's cosmetics amongst the Kwa. She did work with the Bushmen in the 1970s to 80s, and she was in fact a student of Richard Lee's at that time. She's going to go into questions that have been raised recently about the sexual division of labor among hunter-gatherers. And she's just got so many amazing stories that should be a really very interesting talk. But just say thank you so much to Ellie for talking to us today. I know it's not necessarily so easy. So thank you very much. I think it's been very much enjoyed.
You're very welcome. I'm very pleased I could keep the talk.
And you've got to write it up.
I just said it publicly, so I will.
You've got to. We'll help. We'll help. Thank you.
Many thanks.